Hello everybody, I hope you're having a great day. In today's tutorial, we are going to go over doing a paper falling through the air animation. And basically the paper is going to be dropping from out of the frame in the top, and it's just going to fall slowly down to the ground and just land on the floor. And so to do that, we are going to go over animating an object on a spline. We are also going to use the Bend Deformer again. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is come in here and I'm going to create a piece of paper. I am going to create a plane, and there it is right there. I'm going to scroll into this thing, hold the number 1 key to pan up. Let me pull it up above the ground. And what I want to do is, for this piece of paper, I'm going to go to the Object tab, and I'm going to make the width smaller than the height, something like that. And I'm going to make it a little bit extreme, just so we can make sure to see the which way it's facing as we're animating. And then the next thing I'm going to do is come to the materials, and I'm going to give this a color. So I will color it yellow, so we have some nice contrast there. And I should also mention that I've got my display settings right now on constant shading, and that just makes things a little easier to see. Yours might be on the shading with the lines here. And a lot of times I like to have it on that as well, just so I can see the segments. And so what I want to do is, before we get started, I'm going to put the Bend Deformer on at the very beginning. So right up here, we're going to grab the Bend Deformer. And I found that it's easiest to start with having the Bend Deformer already on the paper, even though we're not animating it first, just because it gets a little bit more difficult to line it up the correct way once we start animating. So I'm going to grab the Bend Deformer, drag it as a child of the plane, and once I do that, I'm going to click Fit to Parent, and it fits that Bend Deformer right around our plane. And so you can't really see it, but if I increase this just a little bit on the Y-axis here, then we should be able to see. I'm going to scroll in to kind of rotate around so you can see that that Bend Deformer is kind of like a box right around this. And so I'm going to just try to do a little bend, and right away we can see it's not bending in the right direction, and that's usually the case. So to fix that, come to the Coordinates tab, and then what we want to do is just rotate this, let's see, -90. And the only reason I know this is because I've done this a few times. Sometimes I have to come in here and mess around with this. -90 degrees on H and then 90 degrees on B. Bending in the direction that I'm wanting. I want it to bend this way. But we can see there's a few issues, and actually I'll go back to the line so we can see we don't have enough segments. Let me grab the plane, pull this up. And so that's why we're getting this low poly look. And so to fix that, just go to the plane object, and let's increase the height segments so we get that nice and smooth. Something right around there should do. And then the other issue that we're having is it's stretching. And so the way to fix that is to go to the Bend Deformer and click on Keep Length, and that will stop the stretching. The Bend Deformer is just too short right here, so it's doing a sharp bend. And this is actually cool if you want it to bend like really sharply right here. So this is kind of a cool way of actually end up doing this a lot. But for this, we don't want it to. And so we can fix that by, if we're clicked on the Bend Deformer right here on the size, I can increase the size of the Y even more, and that will just give us more of a like an even bend right there. And I'm just going to take this down. I don't really need to, but just visually I think it's nice to see that a little shorter, and then bring that in a little bit. All right, so we've got the Bend Deformer. It should be bending in the right way, so we can kind of see this is how we can bend our piece of paper. And the paper does feel pretty long. I'm going to go back to the plane, and I'll actually just widen that out, just fix the proportions just a little bit. I'm going to put the Bend Deformer back to 0. And so what we want to do now is we want to draw our spline. And so thinking about the animation, it's going to come down and fall like that until it hits the ground. And I was doing some research on some other paper falling animations, and sometimes I noticed that the paper would fall down and it would do like a little flip and then come down. And so I thought it'd be fun to start with doing a little flip on the first one, and then the other ones we'll just keep it falling back and forth. So to do that, we're going to draw a spline, and then we're going to have this piece of paper follow that spline. So I'm going to go up to the different views here, and I'm going to go to the right view and scroll out a little bit. And it's always easier to draw these splines in a 2D view. So I'm going to grab my pen tool, spline pen, and I'm just going to draw this like it's coming down from the sky. So I'm going to click, and then what I want to do is click and drag, and it will make that spline a soft edge right there. And then I'm going to click right here and drag. And so this is the part where it's going to flip upside down. So I'm going to have it have a little curve there. And then we'll click and drag, something like that. And then we'll come up. And then the rest of these, I'm just going to have the paper not flip. So I'm going to make this a corner edge. And click up, another corner edge. And then we'll come down to the ground right here. And I'll need to bring that down a little bit more. Something like that. I'm going to click the escape key to get out of drawing the spline. And then I'll get the live selection tool, and I'm in point mode right here. So I can just grab that point, bring it down to the ground, and this should be down on the ground as well. So there is our little path, and maybe I'll grab this and move this up higher so we don't see it as it's coming down. It'll be pretty steep right there. We can move that over a little bit. And maybe we can adjust these. If I grab this tool right here, so to grab the handle, we can't actually use this one. We have to use the move tool. So I'm just going to kind of move this out. And so if you want to adjust any of these, now is a good time to do it. You can grab these handles and adjust them if you need to. So I'll go back to this live selection tool. And then what we want to do is we're going to click on our plane. And what we want to do is add this tag. So I'm going to right click, animation tags, and we're going to do a line to spline. And when I do that, it puts a little tag on the plane. So it's right there. Make sure it's right on the plane. And if I click on this, it gives me access to some of these parameters here. And so what we want to do is put a spline in there. So that's our spline. It says spline path. Drop it in. And what will happen is this piece of paper, which is our plane, will automatically just shoot up to the top of this spline. And it's right there. And so it'll be at the starting position. So if we look here, I clicked on this align to spline tag, there's the position. And so this is what we're going to animate. So you can see the piece of paper animating down to the ground. And it should reach the end at 100%. So that's kind of the way that works. So let's go back out to perspective mode. Let's scroll out, see if we can see what's happening here. All right, I'm not too worried about the camera view. We'll kind of set that up later, but we'll just be looking at this from some different angles at first. I'm going to go back to display and do constant shading. There we go. And I'm going to click a keyframe for the position. So we're at 0. Click a keyframe. We want this to be at 0%. That's the starting point. And then I'm going to go up to close to 100 frames here. And then I'm going to put that to 100. And I'm just randomly picking this number. I thought that this was a pretty good distance. If your timeline doesn't go up to 100, you could change it right here. So if it's at 50, if you just type in 100 there, you can go up to 100. You can even make this go longer if you want it to go slower. Pull it back to right around 95. Rewind it, and let's just hit play and see the general speed for this. So this is a good time to adjust this speed, because once we start getting in here and animating a lot of other things, it gets harder and harder to adjust things because we've got a lot of keyframes all over the place. We want to put some keyframes at different points along this paper's traveling journey here. And so we want to do it at each point there so we can control the timing between each point. So what I'm going to do is go to the align to spline tag, and I'm going to click and just record the current position when the piece of paper is on the corner. And then I'm going to do the same for all the corners. Click that. Click that. And then the last one, we already have that one keyframe. And what that's going to allow us to do is if we want to change the time it takes from getting from here to here, like make this go faster, we could adjust these keyframes. So let's just look at this. So if I move this over, it's going to go really fast to get to there, and then, you know, slow down right there and going faster. I'm going to undo that because I liked that general speed, but what we can do instead of moving the keyframes, there's nothing wrong with moving the keyframes, but I think it might be just as efficient and even better is if we go and adjust the curves. So I'm going to rewind it and I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to open up the line to spline down here in the timeline, click on the position, make sure that I'm in F-curve mode. If I'm in keyframe mode, I can just click on that to go to F-curve mode. And if you don't see your spline, just click H and it'll frame everything up. Just click in here and click H. And then here's our keyframes that we just set. And what I want to do is, this is going from 0 to 100%. And so what I can do is I'm just going to grab these and just slow down the parts where it's on the corners. Because if we think about this piece of paper, it's going to go fast. And if you've watched some of these animations of paper falling, it seems like a lot of the times it's going fast right here, and then it slows down and then goes fast, kind of slows down, fast, right? So we can slow it down on these points when we're hitting those edges right there. So I'm going to grab that and just slow it down just a little bit. Now, one thing that's really important for this as we're doing this is if this handle goes, if this line starts going the opposite direction, that means it's going backwards on this spline. Because as we're going to 100%, if we're higher percentage right here and then we go lower, then it's going to start going backwards, and we don't want that. So what I want to make sure and do is grab all of these and hit the 0 key, and that will just zero that out. Because even just a little bit of it going the other direction is going to look weird on our animation. It'll make it kind of stagger and go backwards, which would be really weird for paper to do. So now we have some more dynamic movement happening here. So what we want to do is have this paper rotated down. So I'm going to click on the plane, go to the coordinates, and what we want to do is we want to start by animating this rotation. So we want this paper to be going down at the beginning like that. So I'm going to click a keyframe at the beginning like that. So we start facing down, and then we're going to just flatten this out right here. So the cool thing is about having this spline is we can use that as a guide for how this paper should probably be turned. So I'm just going to go through this. We will have a lot of keyframes on this rotation and the bending, especially the rotation, but that's looking pretty good. And right here, I think it could bend up just a little bit. And let's scroll in a little bit so you can see that. I'm also going to just rotate the paper just slightly like that, and I may keep it like that, or I might animate that, but I think that's a little easier to see, especially for the tutorial and for the viewer of the animation. So we'll come down, we'll go up. And so this is the trickiest part of our animation here. So what I want to do is have this do a flip. So it's going to come up, and I'd say right around here, let's go probably to a keyframe. We want to have that kind of going around like that. And then it's going to flip under. So I'll go like that. There we go. And then it's a little hard to see what's happening there, but let me rotate so you can kind of see. So that's following pretty good, but I think we need to go up a little bit like that. And then somewhere in there, kind of follow that along, follow that up. And then we'll come back down, and so we'll rotate this down right there. And the paper's turned a little weird. I think we'll fix that a little later. I don't like the way it's facing now, rotating the other direction since we flipped, but let's just keep on this one first. So I'll flatten that out so it's following that curve, like a piece of paper might fall. So it's following that curve right there, yep. And then right here, it should be bending up as it's going up. And just kind of thinking about how would a piece of paper fall. Like, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea, and I actually have done this. Just drop a piece of paper in your room, see what it does. It would probably do stuff that's different than what we're seeing here, but this is, kind of a cartoon style in a way, paper falling. Let me see how that's looking there. I think this needs to go down, yeah, like that. Something like that, and we will be readjusting all these, unfortunately. as we continue this. This is definitely the more of the challenging part right here, is this rotation and the bending, and then it'll slide in. Okay, so we have to fix some of those other rotational issues, but we'll fix those. And once we add the bend, we will be adjusting that too. So let's click play. And overall, that's looking pretty decent, I would say. Let's add our bend, and then we'll come in and fix some of our other rotation along the way. Let's say it's cruising down. And what we want to do, let's click on the bend, go to the object. Let's rewind this and get the strength at 0 at the beginning. So when we're up there at 0, it's flat. And then as we gain speed, the paper can start to bend. We have two ways of bending it, right? This way or that way. So I know that neither of those actually look correct yet, but if we bend it this way, bend it back right there, then what we could do is fix the rotation. So let's click on the plane and let's get the coordinates, and then what we can do is just bend this back like this. So I know we just did the rotation, but now we can adjust it to fit with our bend. And really you could have done the bend first and then the rotation, but sometimes it's nice to see the way that it rotates first and just kind of get that dialed in, and then just adjust as we're going like this. So something like that looks pretty good. And so right here, I think we could slow down that, bend it back down to 0, and then have it fall over and then start to bend as it reaches this point. We'll bend it up this way again, and then we'll rotate it. Hopefully you can kind of see, just need to rotate that to fix that. So we'll go to the plane, coordinates, and we'll rotate that up. Now we've got two bends right here, or sorry, two rotation keyframes. And so what I can do is I'm just gonna grab this one we just made and replace the other one by dragging it right on top. And we'll come up here, and it needs to be rotated the right way. So I'll click on the plane and I'll see, okay, there's our rotation keyframe. So this is actually a good place to adjust our bend. So we're on the same keyframe as the rotation, so we don't have to replace them. Sometimes you just have to either way, but let's, what we want to do here is our coordinate, rotate up. And so I'll record that keyframe. So let's just check that out. Let's rewind to this. So we'll see we have one area where we may need to fix that right there. So it goes up right there. The bend might be a little extreme, and actually right here we might want to straighten this out. So let's go to the bend object and let's turn this to 0 right there. So it goes flat for a second and then starts to bend again as we reach around this point. So that time it's bending in the right direction. And then right here, we can flatten it back out again. Click a keyframe there and then come down, and then right around when it's gaining speed again, we can bend it. And we're gonna have to rotate it, looks like. So I'll click the strength there. On the plane, and we can just rotate it on the keyframe right there. So that's rotating in the right direction, right? Click that. And then right here, it's bending the wrong direction. Let's see if we just delete that keyframe. There we go. Maybe we don't need that one. And then as it hits the ground, it should not be bent anymore. And so I'll grab on the bend again, object, turn that to 0. And it looks like the paper is, let's see, going through the ground. And that's just our other rotation. So we need to fix that anyway. So let's hit play and let's see what this is looking like. And if it's rotating weird, I'm holding the Alt key just to rotate here. If it's doing this and it's all weird, a little trick is if I click on the object I'm trying to rotate around, it'll allow me to rotate around that object. Let's rewind it. Let's click whatever it was in there for the beginning, unless you want to adjust it from in a different angle at the beginning. I think that's fine for this one. And so right here, let's see what happens if we rotate this back a little bit, back to 0. And this really is just depends on what the style that you want to go for. You can adjust these however you think would work, but I think, you know, something like that looks pretty good. It's right here. I think we can, fix that that way. Rotate it back that way. And let me actually display lines. Let me turn those lines back on so we can have a little bit of a better idea of how this is rotated. And let's say right there, let's just click a keyframe for that. Let's just make sure. So let's say it's going over, right? So we want it to go over right there. And that seems about right. Let's see if we can adjust this a little more. So right here, we've got a weird little issue where it's rotating kind of weird. So I think what we need to do is let's click on the plane. Let's open up this plane and let's go to the keyframe mode, and we can see a little bit better what's happening here. So there's our P, there's our B rotation. So let's click on the P. So I think we've got two really close to each other right there, and I think we could delete one. Let's start by just deleting that one and see what happens. So we don't get that weird rotation there, right? It's pretty flat there. I think, let's click on the plane. What would help this? I think it still needs to be facing up right there. I'm gonna click a keyframe for that one. That's our first time of using that rotation. And let's actually go back a few frames and click a keyframe. That way we lock in 0, so it's not changing this whole time. So it just changes right around here. And let's just see if this looks good or bad. It could look bad for sure. And then I'm just rotating that a little bit. And then we'll go down like that. For some reason, that seems better to me. When we watch this, we can adjust it. And then maybe we'll rotate it back to something like that, right around that point. And then right there, it seems too abrupt. I think it should still be kind of facing back a little bit, right? It may need to rotate back even more right there. So in a way, this animation is almost getting to be frame by frame, right? We're doing a lot of keyframes. Let's see how bad that I messed this up. And by the way, I just want to mention that this spline won't show up in the final animation, but just in case you were wondering that. All right, so play. All right, we need to fix the end. It needs to be at -180. So we'll click that. And so, because we don't want it to do a flip right there on the ground. So -180. And then our other problem is, let's see if it's at this one. Yep. So that one needs to be at 0 also. So it's not going through the ground. I'm going to click a keyframe for this other one so I can see it's not filled in, which that means that I didn't record it. So I don't want it to be animating all the way because I'm going to record a keyframe at the end. So I don't want it animating all from there. I want it to be right around there at this point, at least for now. And then right here, it'll go to 0. And that'll flatten that out. There we go. I think that's looking pretty fun. All right, so what we want to do now is adjust some of our animation curves. Let's just see where we can make some adjustments if needed. So I'm going to click on the F curve mode and just take a look at these rotational curves here. And I'm going to click on those, and then I'm going to click the H key. And what we could try is, instead of easing right at that point, since we already kind of have a lot of speed happening, let's just make that linear. Click H right before it hits that point. So instead of easing there, I think just moving right into it, and then actually we could maybe extend to that part there and do some easing right there instead. And we could, just for fun, pull this out a little bit. Click that, click H. I think all that looks pretty good. Let's just increase our easing just here and there like I was doing a minute ago, just to make things a little bit more dramatic. Click 0. Let's grab that one. Let's just extend that a little bit. Click 0. And let's see what's happening at the end there. That's that last one. So we definitely want some easing there. Let's just see if there's anything else here. Our bend strength. Click H. Let's see if we could do some kind of animation curve adjustments here as we're bending. And I think we could do our general rule of giving this a little more. I didn't kind of mess that curve up, so I can just grab that, pull that, and what I'm doing here is again just adding that kind of dynamic movement. We can increase this at the very end, so we have a nice ease at the very end. So at this point, it just comes down to some fine tuning, framing up your shot, so you can come in here and figure out what you want your shot to look like. So I'm going to pause this and click on this paper and click the Alt key to rotate. So if you want it to be, a shot like this where you're looking down or straight from the side, I think that I kind of like something like this, and I might zoom in a little bit more. All right, well, I like the way that looks. I hope that has been helpful to you. If you're using the template I provided for the class, you can of course just come up to this gear icon and you can click the Save tab, give it a name right there, and you can set the path right there to wherever you want to save this file. Everything else should be set up if you're using my template. MP4 files, what you'll get, and all the other settings here should be good for rendering with the standard render. I will see you in the next class. Thanks, bye.